Stop the show. Now. The command from Michael Jackson himself cut through the thunderous energy of Madison Square Garden like a blade through silk. In the middle of Thriller, during the most anticipated moment of the entire Dangerous World Tour, the King of Pop had just done something that had never happened in his 30-year career. He stopped performing mid-song because of what he saw in row 23. What happened next between Michael Jackson and a dying child would become the most heartbreaking and beautiful moment in concert history, but nobody in that New York arena was prepared for the profound lesson about humanity that was about to unfold. It was November 14th, 1992, and Madison Square Garden was electric with an energy that only a Michael Jackson concert could generate. 20,000 fans had packed into every corner of the legendary venue, their anticipation building for months. This wasn't just any performance. This was Michael's triumphant return to New York after years away, and the opening night had already been declared sold out within 47 minutes of tickets going on sale. But what Michael didn't know was that in row 23, seat 14, sat an 8-year-old girl named Sarah Mitchell who was living her final dream. And what neither of them could have predicted was that the next 15 minutes would teach the entire world what it truly means to be human. Sarah Mitchell had been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia when she was 6 years old. For 2 years, she had endured chemotherapy treatments that left her small body weak and exhausted, hospital stays that stole her childhood one day at a time, and medical procedures that no child should ever have to understand. Her parents, Jennifer and Robert Mitchell, had watched their vibrant, dancing daughter slowly fade as the disease progressed despite every treatment option available. But through all the pain, through every difficult moment and devastating setback, Sarah had held on to one unshakable dream. She wanted to see Michael Jackson perform live. She wanted to see the man whose music had been the soundtrack to her hospital stays, whose dance moves she practiced from her wheelchair, whose voice had given her comfort during the darkest nights when the pain seemed unbearable. Michael Jackson wasn't just her favorite entertainer. He was her lifeline to hope. Sarah's bedroom walls were covered with Michael Jackson posters. She had every album, every videotape of every performance she could find. Her nurses knew that when Sarah was having a particularly difficult day, the only thing that could make her smile was putting on Man in the Mirror and watching her try to moonwalk despite the IV tubes attached to her fragile arms. "Michael Jackson makes me feel like I can fly," Sarah told her mother during one of their late-night hospital conversations. "When I watch him dance, I forget I'm sick. I forget everything hurts. I just feel free." 3 months before the Madison Square Garden concert, Sarah's doctors delivered the news that every parent dreads. The leukemia had become resistant to treatment. They had exhausted every conventional option, and the experimental treatments weren't showing the results they had hoped for. Sarah's prognosis had shifted from hopeful to terminal. Jennifer Mitchell remembered that conversation with devastating clarity. "They told us we should focus on making Sarah's remaining time as comfortable and meaningful as possible. They suggested we think about what would bring her joy. And the very first thing Sarah said was, 'I want to see Michael Jackson.'" The Make-A-Wish Foundation had been working with Sarah's family for months, but coordinating a meeting with Michael Jackson, one of the most famous and protected celebrities in the world, was proving nearly impossible. His schedule was overwhelmingly demanding, his security team was notoriously strict, and the logistics of arranging a private meeting seemed insurmountable. But then something unexpected happened. When Michael's assistant mentioned Sarah's situation during a routine briefing about charity requests, Michael stopped what he was doing immediately. "Tell me about this little girl," Michael said, his voice carrying that distinctive gentle quality that people who knew him personally recognized as genuine compassion. When he learned Sarah's story, the years of treatment, her unwavering love for his music, her dream of seeing him perform, Michael made a decision that his team found both characteristic and challenging. "Get her tickets to Madison Square Garden, front section, and make sure someone from my team knows exactly where she's sitting." But Michael went further. He insisted on receiving updates about Sarah's condition leading up to the concert. He wanted to know if she would be strong enough to attend. He asked specific questions about what might make her experience more comfortable, and he made it clear that if Sarah was in that audience, he wanted to know exactly where she was sitting so he could make sure she had a moment she would never forget. What Michael's team didn't share with him because they didn't want to add to his already overwhelming emotional burden was just how fragile Sarah had become in the weeks leading up to the concert. She had been hospitalized twice in October, her energy levels were declining rapidly, and her doctors had expressed serious concerns about whether she would be physically capable of attending a concert that would last nearly 3 hours. But Sarah was determined. "I don't care if it's the last thing I do,"
She told her parents, with a fierce determination that seemed impossible from such a frail body, "I'm going to see Michael Jackson."
On the morning of November 14th, Sarah woke up in her hospital room with renewed purpose. The doctors had agreed to discharge her for the day, with strict instructions and emergency medications. But everyone knew this was an enormous risk. Sarah's condition could deteriorate rapidly, and the excitement and energy of a concert could potentially trigger a medical crisis. As Jennifer helped Sarah get dressed that morning, carefully fitting the pink dress that Sarah had insisted on wearing, despite how loose it hung on her thin frame, she couldn't stop crying. "I'm not sad, Mommy," Sarah said, noticing her mother's tears. "This is the happiest day of my life." Robert Mitchell later described the journey to Madison Square Garden as one of the most emotionally complex experiences of his life. "We were taking our dying daughter to a concert, knowing it might be one of the last big experiences she would have. Every moment felt both precious and devastating." They arrived at the venue early, and the Make-A-Wish representative who had been coordinating Sarah's attendance made sure they were comfortably seated in row 23, which offered both excellent visibility and relatively easy access to medical assistance if needed. Sarah's parents had packed a bag with all of her emergency medications, and they had alerted venue medical staff to their presence. As the arena filled with excited fans and the pre-show energy built, Sarah sat in her seat with her eyes closed, listening to the sounds around her. The chatter of thousands of voices, the excited screams as house lights dimmed, the anticipation that seemed to vibrate through the very air itself. "I'm here," she whispered to herself. "I'm really here." When Michael Jackson finally took the stage at exactly 8 p.m., the explosion of sound and light was overwhelming. The opening notes of Jam sent the entire arena into a frenzy, and Sarah, despite her weakened condition, was on her feet, screaming and crying with joy like every other fan around her. For the first 45 minutes of the concert, Sarah experienced pure magic. She watched Michael perform with the precision and passion that had made him a legend. She saw him moonwalk across the stage. She witnessed the intricate choreography that she had practiced in her imagination countless times. And for those blessed minutes, she forgot completely about the disease ravaging her body. But midway through Thriller, something began to change. Sarah's energy, which had been sustained by pure adrenaline and excitement, started to fade. Her legs became shaky, her breathing became labored, and a wave of dizziness washed over her that made her grip the seat in front of her for support. Jennifer noticed immediately. Years of monitoring her daughter's condition had made her acutely aware of every subtle shift in Sarah's physical state. "Honey, do you need to sit down?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. Sarah shook her head stubbornly. "I'm fine, I'm not missing this." But she wasn't fine. The combination of excitement, crowds, lights, and her severely compromised immune system was taking a devastating toll. Sarah's face had gone pale, her hands were trembling, and her breathing had become shallow and rapid in a way that her parents recognized as dangerous. "We need to get her to the medical station," Robert said urgently, moving to help Sarah from her seat. That's when it happened. Michael Jackson, who was in the middle of one of his most iconic performances, suddenly stopped dancing. He stopped singing. He stood completely still on the massive stage, his eyes scanning the audience with an intensity that his band members and crew recognized as something significant happening. The music continued to play through the sound system, but Michael was no longer performing. He was searching, looking for something or someone in the sea of faces below him. From his position on stage, Michael had the trained eye of someone who had performed for millions of people over decades. He could read crowds. He could sense when something was wrong. And in that moment, he saw a little girl in a pink dress being helped from her seat by two adults who looked panicked. He saw medical staff beginning to move toward that section, and he saw something in that scene that struck him deeply. Without explanation to his band, without warning to his crew, Michael walked to the front of the stage and held up his hand, signaling for the music to stop completely. Madison Square Garden fell into confused silence. 20,000 people stopped screaming and started whispering. What was happening? Was this part of the show? Why had Michael stopped performing? Michael spoke into his microphone, his voice calm but commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need everyone to remain calm and seated. Medical personnel, please assist the family in Section 23 immediately." The crowd's confusion turned to concern as people realized this wasn't part of the planned performance. This was real. Something was happening. But what shocked everyone, including his own security team and management, was what Michael did next. He walked off the stage completely, heading directly toward Section 23, toward Sarah Mitchell.
Michael, you can't, his head of security said urgently through his earpiece. The crowd control. I don't care, Michael interrupted, his voice carrying a firmness that his team rarely heard. There's a child who needs help. Nothing else matters right now. As Michael made his way through the backstage area and into the audience section, venue security scrambled to create a path and manage the crowd that was now on their feet, trying to see what was happening. Phones weren't yet ubiquitous in 1992, but those who had cameras were capturing what would become one of the most documented moments of spontaneous celebrity compassion in history.
When Michael reached row 23, he found Sarah barely conscious in her father's arms, while her mother was frantically trying to administer emergency medication. The venue's medical team had just arrived, and the situation was clearly critical.
I'm Michael, he said softly, kneeling down next to Sarah at eye level. Can you hear me, sweetheart?
Sarah's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, confusion crossed her pale face. Then recognition hit, and despite her condition, despite the medical crisis happening in her small body, she smiled.
Michael Jackson, she whispered, her voice so quiet he had to lean in to hear her.
That's right, honey, Michael said gently, taking her small, frail hand in his gloved one.
I heard you came to see me perform.
That means everything to me.
Jennifer Mitchell, tears streaming down her face, tried to explain.
I'm so sorry for the disruption.
She has leukemia, and we shouldn't have.
Michael held up his hand gently.
Please don't apologize. You've done nothing wrong. Your daughter's health is all that matters right now.
The venue medics were assessing Sarah's condition, checking her vital signs, and preparing to move her to the medical station. But Sarah, with strength that seemed impossible given her condition, gripped Michael's hand tighter.
Don't want to leave, she whispered, wanted to see you dance.
Michael Jackson, one of the most protected and scheduled celebrities in the world, made a decision in that moment that would be talked about for decades. He turned to the venue medical staff and asked, if we get her comfortable with medical support right here, would she be stable enough to watch the rest of the concert from this location? The head medic hesitated.
Mr. Jackson, we really should move her to a facility with proper equipment, I understand, Michael interrupted gently. But this little girl came here tonight because watching me perform means something to her, and I think we can find a way to make that happen safely. He turned back to Sarah's parents, with your permission, of course. Robert and Jennifer looked at each other, both thinking the same devastating thought. Sarah might not have much time left. If this was what she wanted, if this brought her joy in her final days, who were they to deny her that? If it's medically possible, Jennifer said through tears, then yes, please. What happened next transformed a concert into something far more profound. Michael Jackson directed his crew to bring a comfortable chair with proper back support to row 23. Medical equipment was quietly set up in the aisle, an oxygen tank was positioned nearby, and Sarah was made as comfortable as possible with medical staff monitoring her constantly. But Michael went further. He asked his technical crew to set up a special monitor in that section that would give Sarah a clear, close-up view of the stage. And then he did something that left everyone speechless. I'm going to dedicate the rest of tonight's performance to Sarah, Michael announced to the entire arena, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. She reminds all of us what it truly means to fight for what you love, what it means to hold on to dreams even when everything seems impossible. The crowd's response was immediate and overwhelming. 20,000 people began applauding, not for Michael, but for Sarah, for her courage, for her strength, for her unwavering spirit that had brought her to that arena despite everything working against her. Michael returned to the stage, but everything about the rest of that performance was different. Every song felt more personal, every movement carried more meaning. And multiple times throughout the show, Michael would look directly at Sarah in row 23, making sure she was okay, making sure she was still there, making sure she knew he was performing just for her. During Heal the World, Michael spoke directly to Sarah through his performance. This song is for you, sweetheart, because you've taught everyone here tonight what healing really means. It's not about being cured, it's about finding joy even in the darkest moments. Sarah, despite her condition deteriorating as the night progressed, watched every moment with absolute focus. The pain in her body seemed to disappear when Michael was on stage. The fear about her condition faded. And for those precious hours, she was just a little girl watching her hero perform. Toward the end of the concert, during Man in the Mirror, Michael made an announcement that brought the entire arena to tears. I want to invite someone very special to join me on stage. Sarah Mitchell, if you're feeling strong enough, would you come up here with me? The venue erupted in applause and cheers. Medical staff quickly consulted, checking Sarah's vitals. She was weak, dangerously so, but stable enough for brief movement with support. With her father carrying her carefully and medical personnel accompanying them every step, Sarah was brought onto the Madison Square Garden stage. Michael met them at the stairs, gently taking Sarah into his own arms. Is this okay? He whispered to her, making sure she was comfortable. Sarah nodded, tears of joy streaming down her thin face. This is perfect.
Michael carried Sarah to center stage, and for a moment, time seemed to stop completely. 20,000 people were silent, witnessing something that transcended entertainment and entered the realm of pure human connection. "Sarah," Michael said softly into his microphone, making sure everyone could hear, "you are one of the strongest people I've ever met, and I want you to know that you've changed me tonight. You've reminded me why I do what I do. It's not about the fame or the money or the awards. It's about this. It's about bringing joy to people who need it. It's about connection. It's about love." Then Michael did something that no one expected. He carefully sat Sarah down in a chair that had been brought on stage, and he performed Man in the Mirror, kneeling beside her, singing directly to her, holding her hand throughout the entire song. The image of Michael Jackson, the king of pop, kneeling beside a dying child and singing about making the world better, became one of the most iconic and emotionally powerful moments in music history. Cameras captured it. People who were there never forgot it, and the message it sent about humanity, compassion, and what truly matters in life resonated far beyond that November night. When the song ended, Michael gently picked Sarah up again. "Thank you for coming tonight," he whispered to her, loud enough for his microphone to pick up. "Thank you for reminding me what's really important." Sarah, exhausted but radiating happiness, whispered back, "Thank you for making me feel like I could fly." Michael carried Sarah off stage and back to her parents, making sure she was comfortable and medically stable before returning for his final song. But before he did, he spent 10 minutes just sitting with Sarah and her family, talking quietly, making sure they had everything they needed, and exchanging information so he could stay in contact with them. "You're part of my family now," Michael told Sarah, "and I'm going to make sure you get the best medical care available. We're going to fight this together." The concert concluded 30 minutes later than scheduled, but no one complained. Everyone in Madison Square Garden that night knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, something that had nothing to do with entertainment and everything to do with humanity. True to his word, Michael Jackson personally called Sarah's parents the next day. He arranged for Sarah to be transferred to one of the best pediatric cancer centers in the country. He covered all medical expenses that insurance didn't handle, and he stayed in regular contact with the family, calling Sarah weekly to check on her progress and lift her spirits. Sarah's story didn't have the miracle ending everyone hoped for. 3 months after the Madison Square Garden concert, on February 3, 1993, Sarah Mitchell passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by her family. But in those final 3 months, Sarah experienced more joy and peace than anyone thought possible. She had been to a Michael Jackson concert. She had danced on stage with her hero. She had felt loved and valued and seen in a way that transcended her illness. At Sarah's funeral, which Michael attended personally despite his overwhelming schedule, he spoke briefly to the gathered mourners. "Sarah taught me more in one night than I've learned in 30 years of performing. She taught me that life isn't about how long you live, it's about how deeply you feel, how courageously you love, and how you find joy even when everything tells you it's impossible." Michael established a foundation in Sarah's name that provided concert experiences for terminally ill children. Over the years, thousands of kids who were facing their final days got to see their favorite artist perform, to feel special, to have one night where their illness didn't define them. The Mitchell family became close friends with Michael, and years later, Jennifer Mitchell shared what that night meant to them. Michael didn't have to stop his concert. He didn't have to acknowledge Sarah. He could have let venue staff handle everything quietly. But he chose to see our daughter, really see her, not as a sick child, but as a person deserving of dignity and joy. That choice didn't save her life, but it gave her life meaning in those final months. The video footage and photos from that night spread around the world, but not in the sensationalized way celebrity moments often do. Instead, they became a testament to something far more important than fame or talent. They became evidence of humanity at its most beautiful, of compassion in action, of love transcending circumstances. Child life specialists began using the story of Michael and Sarah in training programs, teaching medical professionals about the importance of quality of life, of helping sick children experience joy and normalcy, even during treatment. Psychologists referenced it when discussing the healing power of meaningful experiences, and parents of sick children found hope in knowing that even in the darkest times, moments of pure joy are possible. Robert Mitchell kept one item from that night in a frame in his home, a handwritten note from Michael to Sarah that had been delivered to the hospital 2 days after the concert. It read, "Dear Sarah, you are my hero. You showed me what true strength looks like. Keep fighting, keep dreaming, and know that wherever you go, you carry my love with you. Your friend always, Michael." When Michael Jackson died in 2009, the Mitchell family was among those invited to his private memorial service. They brought with them that framed note, and shared with other mourners the story of how Michael had transformed their daughter's final months. "The world knew Michael Jackson as the king of pop," Robert said during his tribute. "But we knew him as the man who stopped everything, his concert, his schedule, his own needs, because he saw a suffering child and decided that nothing else mattered in that moment. That's the Michael Jackson the world should remember." Today, in the lobby of one of New York's leading children's hospitals, there's a photograph of Michael Jackson kneeling beside Sarah Mitchell on the Madison Square Garden stage. Below it, a plaque reads, "In memory of Sarah Mitchell, who reminded us all that joy is possible even in suffering, and in honor of Michael Jackson, who taught us that true greatness isn't measured by talent or fame, but by how we respond when someone needs compassion." The story of that November night taught millions of people around the world about what it means to be truly human, about seeing others in their pain, about choosing compassion over convenience, about remembering that behind every person, whether they're a global superstar or a sick child in row 23, is a heart that needs to be acknowledged, valued, and loved. Michael Jackson could have ignored the disruption that night. He could have let medical staff handle it quietly. He could have continued his performance without interruption. But he chose differently. He chose to see Sarah, to honor her courage, to give her a moment of pure joy that would define her final months. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching that the most important performances aren't the ones that make us famous. They're the ones that make us human. This beautiful story reminds us that life's most meaningful moments often happen when we're willing to stop what we're doing and truly see the people around us. Michael Jackson was at the peak of his career, performing for 20,000 people, but he stopped everything for one little girl who needed him. He showed us that fame, talent, and success mean nothing if we can't pause to acknowledge someone's pain and bring them joy. How would your life change if you approached every person you met with that same level of compassion? What if you looked past people's circumstances and saw their hearts, their struggles, their dreams? Sarah's story ended too soon, but the impact of that single night of compassion rippled out to touch millions of lives. That's the real power of choosing love over convenience. If this story touched your heart and reminded you what truly matters in life, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to remember that small acts of kindness can change everything. Subscribe and ring that notification bell because we have more incredible true stories that show how compassion transforms lives and proves that our humanity is measured not by what we achieve, but by how we treat those who need us most. Until next time, remember that you never know how much a single moment of genuine kindness might mean to someone who's fighting a battle you can't see.